Rishi Sunak has been named as the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The former Finance Minister takes over from Liz Truss, who was in charge for just 45 tumultuous days before announcing that she would step down. Sunak is expected to take over tomorrow, and it's hoped that the move will help steady the markets in the UK and restore some economic stability.
I am humbled and honoured to have the support of my parliamentary colleagues and to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Rishi Sunak will become Britain's next Prime Minister after he won the race to lead the Conservative Party on Monday.
Rishi Sunak is therefore elected as leader of the Conservative Party.
The former Finance Minister is Britain's third Prime Minister in less than 2 months.
It is the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve the party I love and give back to the country I owe so much to. The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
He will replace Liz Truss, the outgoing leader, who lasted just 44 days in the job before she resigned.
That I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Mr. Sunak defeated centrist politician Penny Mordaunt, who failed to get enough backing from lawmakers to enter the ballot.
I can assure the House.
His other main rival, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, withdrew from the contest, saying he could no longer unite the party after one of the most turbulent periods in British political history.
Hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
One of the wealthiest politicians in Westminster, multimillionaire and former hedge fund boss Sunak, will now face a daunting set of challenges. Speaking to Conservative Party lawmakers Monday, Sunak said his first priority was to deliver economic stability.
But be in no doubt, I am the underdog.
But that won't be an easy task. He'll be expected to launch deep spending cuts to try to rebuild Britain's fiscal reputation just as the country slides into a recession, dragged down by the surging costs of energy and food. The pound and British government bonds jumped briefly on news of Mordaunt's withdrawal, but soon returned to their previous levels. Sunak will also be presiding over a party that has bounced from one crisis to the next in recent months. As it stands, Conservatives are badly split along ideological lines, and the public is increasingly angry at the conduct of its politicians. Sunak first came to national attention when he became Finance Minister under Johnson, just as the global health crisis hit Britain. Set to be the country's first leader of colour and the youngest Prime Minister in more than 200 years, he'll be asked to form a government by King Charles.
Well, for some analysis, we're now joined by Dr. Dale McKinley, who's an independent writer, researcher and lecturer, as well as a political activist. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the programme. One can hardly believe the events that have been taking place in the United Kingdom this year. I mean, some have likened it to a soap opera. Be that as it may, we go back to where Sunak, Truss went off against each other. And it seemed that the sensible choice would have been Sunak. Why did they get it wrong at that time? What was going on?
Well, I think as most people probably now know that, in the UK, like here in South Africa, the party chooses its leader. So it's not a popularly elected leader. So Truss had the backing of her parliamentary colleagues. And you can see from Sunak's, you have to get at least 100 of those votes. So, and then she also had backing of the majority of the sort of insiders within the Conservative Party. Sunak is still seen, even though he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, essentially the finance minister under Boris Johnson, I think he's still seen as somewhat new. He's only came into the scene a few years ago. And I think Truss had the sort of more traditional support. So I think that's what you saw. And plus, Truss was sort of the archetypical, conservative. She modeled herself after Margaret Thatcher, spending cuts, tax. We're going to cut taxes as well. We're going to do all these things that conservatives always say they're going to do. We're going to believe in the markets and the markets will follow. And she spectacularly got it wrong. And so Sunak, who had basically said, if Truss does what she's saying she's going to do, we're going to be in trouble. The markets will react badly. He called it right. And so he was in prime position. And they really didn't have much of a choice, I don't think, in the context of who else was on the ticket.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about what he has to do now, but I can't help but ask, was race an issue? Because it's been bubbling under and it's been talked about.
Well, I don't think really it was in the Conservative Party. This is obviously the first, Sunak is the first candidate or prime minister in this case now of Asian descent. And that's significant. One cannot underestimate that. But the Conservative Party is predominantly white, and it's white, upper middle class and upper class. Its constituents. So he comes, it's a class, in the sense he represents that class because he's one of the wealthiest parliamentarians. But I don't think race really played a significant role in his election, although I think that it's going to help the Conservative Party fend off some of the other sort of trenchant critiques. For example, immigration issues. Sunak is a hardcore anti-immigration person, essentially, even though his parents immigrated to the United Kingdom and he was born there. So I think it'll help him somewhat politically, but I don't think it's a major factor.
All right, so he's a hedge fund manager, he knows money, he knows finance. Is this what Britain needs right now at number 10?
In my estimation, no. Let's sort of say that the markets and the capital, the big financial centers of London and everything, they're going to like him, generally speaking. I think, when he was the finance minister, the chancellor of the exchequer, he basically did the things that he was expected to do and the Conservatives are expected to do. So in that sense, the predictability is going to be good for them. And capital and the markets want predictability. The reason why Truss and basically got hit so hard is because she was like a yo-yo. It was going back and forth, and no one could predict what she was going to do or what the next policy. She was making U-turns. So I think in that sense, he will be good for the markets and for those who are wealthy in capitals, which is what the Conservatives want to be. But for the majority of the population of the UK, no. What is he going to do? He's going to do what most Conservatives do, which is he's going to rely on spending cuts. He's going to raise, interestingly enough, he understands that there has to be some taxes that have to come in. So he's going to raise corporate tax. He's promised to raise corporate tax a bit, but it's so low already that that's not going to make a huge bit of difference. And the profits have been massive. So in that context, his economic policies, I don't think are going to be particularly controversial in terms of the Conservative, but he's not going to do, or he hasn't said he's going to do much for the ordinary folks. He said he's going to throw a few billion in sort of social relief packages. He's going to put a cap, as Truss did, on energy prices. But those are minor things. What Britain needs is it needs a much more sort of redistribution to the lower end of the spectrum. I mean, the poverty levels, the people who are in trouble are at record levels in the UK. And I don't think Sunak is going to have the policies to deal with that at all.
Are we going to see a shake-up in his cabinet or, the key people like Jeremy Hunt staying where they are and maybe maybe even a job for Liz Truss?
I don't think he's going to bring Liz Truss back on board. But I think he's going to keep Jeremy Hunt. I think that he understands that shifting and probably changing at this stage is not a good thing. He'll bring his close advisors, many of whom are not really particularly well known outside the Conservative Party in the UK. I think the new Home Secretary is probably going to be kept. So the key positions, he'll probably try to have some continuity with the Truss, the 44 days of Truss's government. But I think in the sort of other sort of minor and secondary positions, he'll bring on some new blood and younger people. Yeah. I mean, Sunak is in his early 40s. This is one of the youngest prime ministers the UK has had. So I think he wants to bring an injection of younger folk in there in that case. But he's not going to rock the boat too much. That's for sure. I think his main thing is going to be steady, to try to regain some of the confidence and try to sort of say, we know what we're doing and we would be able to do that. So in that sense, I think he's going to pretty much retain people that would be trusted by those that they care about, which are the markets and the financiers.
He was one of the leaders of the revolt against Boris Johnson. So does that mean now, firmly and finally, the Boris Johnson era is done with, and that there is, despite all of this excitement and talk in the last few days, that's it then finally?
Yeah, I think Boris Johnson is done as far as the prime ministership, but he's going to play, remember, he's going to go to the back benches of Parliament, and you watch, some of us get very entertained by watching the British Parliament and all the craziness of it, and you're going to probably find Boris Johnson back there sniping, because the other thing which is in the background, which draws parallels to our own ruling party, is the Conservatives are divided. They're very clearly divided. There are factions and groups within the Conservatives who don't agree with each other at all, and in fact hate each other. At least politically they do. Ideologically they might be fairly similar, but you're going to, I think, find Sunak's going to get sniping coming at him from other parts of the Conservative Party, not just the Labour opposition, the Liberal Democrats, but from his own party. And I think that's going to be a challenge for him, because you could see what happened to Liz Truss. Once she lost the support in terms of her own party, it was curtains. And so it's not just about the policies, it's going to be just as it is in the ANC. And here, it's going to be how factional politics play themselves out within the Conservative Party as well.
So, should we care here in Africa? What does this Sunak era mean for the continent? Should we expect anything? And I guess there are people of Asian descent in countries like India who probably are watching as well. Or is this boy British through and through, forget the rest?
Well, he's about as British as they come. I mean, he went to a private, a public, as they call it in the UK, a public fee-paying school, which was for the ultra-wealthy. Then he went to Oxford. He is, he's an Anglophile through and through, but his ancestry is obviously going to play a certain part in sort of people expecting him to be maybe more attuned to the needs of the developing world and the global South. But the policies that what he's so far said are exactly the opposite. So let's take a couple of examples. On immigration, as I said, he's hardcore. He's basically said he will cut British aid to any country that doesn't repatriate their nationals who are kicked out of the UK. He wants the Rwanda repatriation program to continue, and he said he's going to make sure that it happens. He wants to tighten all of the asylum and refugee laws. So on that front, he's not going to prove particularly popular, I don't think, in many, many quarters. He said that China is the British #1 longer-term enemy and threat and challenge. That's what he has said in his policy speeches. Of course, the Ukrainian situation, he said he will back Ukraine. But in the context of China and what's going on our continent, that's going to be very interesting, because if his administration adopts a particularly anti-Chinese policies, then that's obviously going to cause a lot of challenges. But you'll find the traditional trade ties, the historical ties with our country, for example, and with many others, Kenya and others, will no doubt continue. I don't think he'll mess with those too much, because he's going to have to find a way. He was a Brexiteer. He was a hardcore, let's break from the EU. So what he needs to do is he needs to repair a lot of the bilateral relationships and establish bilateral trade regimes with a whole range of countries. And given the energy needs of the UK and Europe, generally speaking, Africa is going to play an increasingly important role in that regard. So he's going to have to balance that. But I think he's going to, first and foremost, his main priority is Britain and British interests, and particularly those that control the economy.
Dale, always great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Right. My pleasure. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. That's Dale McKinley talking about Britain has got a new Prime Minister of Asian descent, first time ever. So history is being made at this time, and we'll be watching this story as it unfolds. Perhaps there's yet another twist.